What would you do if the HOA called 911 on you while you were moving into your own lake house? I came here for peace on the lake, but the HOA called 911 on me the very first morning. They thought I was trespassing. They thought they controlled this water. But every threat they threw at me only walked them closer to the truth they feared most, because they had no idea what I really owned. I reached the edge of Silverpine Lake just after sunrise, the kind of golden morning where the water looks like polished glass and the pine trees glow at the tips. My moving truck rumbled to a stop on the gravel shoulder, dust lifting around the tires and drifting across the quiet lakeside road. Hitched behind my pickup was my mid-size cabin cruiser, the first boat I'd owned in years, rocking gently as if eager to touch the water. I stepped out, stretching my back as I took in the scene. My new lake house standing just beyond a wooden gate, the old cedar boards still holding the warmth of yesterday's sun. The dock below glimmered with dew, and out across the lake, a few fishing kayaks drifted lazily in the distance. It felt like the first clean breath I'd taken in months. I grabbed the first box, tools I'd need to tune the dock winch, and had barely taken 3 steps when I heard the sharp clack of heels snapping against the road. The sound didn't match the serenity of the lake. It was the kind of sound that belonged in a courtroom, not along a stretch of pine and sunlight. I turned. Bethany Reed stormed across the road with the force of someone leading a military charge. Bright pink blazer, clipboard clutched to her chest, lips pulled so tight it looked like she'd swallowed a lemon sideways. I had never met the woman, but somehow I already knew her. The HOA president I'd been warned about in vague, polite tones by the real estate agent. She didn't bother with a greeting, didn't ask my name, didn't ask a single question. "You cannot be here!" she shouted, stabbing her finger toward the ground like she was marking a crime scene. "This is restricted community property. You are trespassing and illegally accessing the marina." I blinked at her. "I own this house," I replied, still holding the toolbox. "Just closed yesterday. I'm Remy Cole." She didn't even pause. Her voice rose by a full octave. "No one moves into this community without HOA authorization. And you certainly do not bring a—" She waved a disgusted hand at my boat. "Commercial vessel into a residential marina." "It's not commercial. It's mine," I said, calm but confused. "And I'm not accessing anything, I'm just unloading." Bethany's eyes widened theatrically, like she'd just uncovered a felony. "Enough! I'm calling 911. Before I could process what was happening, she spun on her heel, pulled out her phone and dialed with the same intensity a surgeon uses for a heart transplant. She angled her body so I could hear every word. "Yes, emergency. This is the HOA president. We have an active trespasser refusing to leave. He has a large vehicle and a suspicious boat. Yes, it appears hostile. A suspicious boat." I looked at my vessel. White hull, polished rails, registration tags still crisp from the state office. The only suspicious thing about it was that I'd finally found time to enjoy the water again. The call lasted less than a minute. She hung up, lifted her chin triumphantly, and barked, "Step away from the property, sir. Authorities are on their way." Neighbors had begun to gather now, heads poking out of lake house windows, people drifting onto their docks, a couple in a kayak slowing their paddles to watch. A man on a fishing boat cut his engine and shaded his eyes, sensing entertainment brewing on the shoreline. I set my toolbox down carefully, refusing to feed whatever fantasy she was spinning. The lake breeze ruffled the pine needles overhead, pushing the scent of fresh water and sun-warmed cedar across the road. It should have been a peaceful start to my new life, but instead, it felt like I'd walked into an ambush. The sheriff's SUV rolled up 3 minutes later, gravel crunching under the tires. Sheriff Marcus Hale stepped out, a steady, broad-shouldered man in his 40s whose expression suggested he'd seen this kind of report before. Too many times. "Morning, Remy," he said after checking my ID. "You just moved in?" 30 minutes ago, I answered. Bethany practically shoved her clipboard under his nose. Arrest him. He's violating marina law, HOA code, and community safety protocols. Sheriff Hale exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose in a way that told me this wasn't his first encounter with Bethany's version of reality. Still, procedure was procedure. He asked me to step to the side while he confirmed my purchase documents. As he walked back to his SUV, Bethany folded her arms and smirked like she'd just toppled a dictator. On the dock, a few neighbors exchanged looks, sympathetic, exhausted ones. This wasn't new to them. Finally, the sheriff returned. Your documents look legitimate, Remy, he said softly. I just need to run one more check. Please wait a moment. He didn't place me under arrest, but the message was clear. Until he verified everything, I wasn't free to move. The breeze shifted again, sending ripples across the lake and a hush across the watching crowd. And in that quiet moment, as Bethany tapped her foot like she was keeping time for my downfall, a question lodged itself deep in my mind. Why was the HOA so desperate to block me from my own marina access? I stood there beside my truck, hands resting lightly on the warm metal, watching the sheriff speak quietly into his radio. Behind him, sunlight danced across the polished hull of my boat. A couple of ducks drifted along the reeds, entirely unbothered by the chaos unfolding above the waterline. The air smelled of pine and motor oil and fresh lake wind, my favorite combination. It should have felt like home already. But Bethany wouldn't stop pacing. She kept throwing sharp glances my way, her pink blazer catching flashes of sun like a distress beacon. Every few seconds she'd scribble something on her clipboard, flipping through pages with the intensity of someone preparing a court case in real time. Don't get comfortable, she warned loud enough for everyone to hear. Your presence here is unauthorized. The HOA has rules, strict rules. A voice drifted from behind me. She's been like this for years. Don't take it personal. I turned. A man stood on the dock, early 40s, sun-bleached cap, grease on his shirt and forearms. He held a boat part in one hand and a wrench in the other. The lake wind ruffled his hair. Name's Jake, he said with a nod. Jake Mercer. I fix half the boats on this lake. That your cruiser? It is, I said. Just brought it in. Congrats. It's a nice ride. Shame you barely got it off the hitch before the storm showed up. He jerked his chin at Bethany without needing to name her. She always like this? I asked quietly. Jake snorted. Like this? Buddy, this is her warm-up lap. You should have seen what she did to the retired couple who put up a wind chime that supposedly disrupted the lakefront aesthetic, or the guy she fined because his kayak was the wrong shade of red. I blinked. The wrong shade? Yep. She's been controlling lake access, slip fees, you name it. Claims it's all HOA jurisdiction. Most of us know it's nonsense, but folks around here are tired. Easier to pay than fight. His voice lowered. But you're different. You didn't flinch. Before I could answer, Sheriff Hale approached us again, paperwork in hand, expression unreadable. All right, he said quietly to me. Everything checks out. Looks like your purchase is legitimate. But for now, Remy, just give me a little more time to calm things down. Bethany exploded before I could thank him. Calm things down? Officer, you must be mistaken. This man forged documents. He must have. No one buys property here without HOA approval. No one. Bethany, the sheriff sighed. HOA approval isn't required for private sales. You know that. She stared at him as if he'd committed heresy. It is required in spirit. This community has standards. Sheriff Hale frowned. Standards don't override county law. Bethany's eyes darted between him and me, narrowing with suspicion. She stepped closer, her perfume cutting through the scent of lake, water. Who exactly are you, Mr. Cole? She demanded. You show up with a boat big enough to block half the marina, claiming you own one of the oldest lake houses here, and you think you can just settle in? I held her gaze. That's usually how buying a home works. Her lips tightened. Not here, Jake muttered under his breath. There she goes. Bethany leaned forward. Tell me the truth. Did someone help you buy this? A developer? Someone trying to challenge the HOA? You don't look like someone who belongs here. The words hung heavy in the air, absurd and insulting all at once. I felt the distant tug of something colder beneath the surface of this interaction, a hostility that didn't make sense for a simple move-in day. The sheriff stepped between us. That's enough, Bethany. But she kept staring, studying me, searching for something she couldn't quite name. And maybe she wasn't wrong to look uneasy, because behind my calm expression, behind the polite tone and steady posture, I knew something she didn't, something she couldn't imagine, something I wasn't ready to reveal yet. Just before the sheriff walked away, he leaned in and said quietly, If I were you, Remy, I'd keep notes, dates, times, everything she says. You're going to need it. When he left, Bethany retreated across the road, still muttering to herself, still furiously writing on her clipboard. Jake remained beside me, arms crossed. She's threatened by you, he said, and she doesn't scare easy. Whatever she thinks you're here for, she believes it's big. I watched Bethany disappear behind the tall lake grass and the white railings of her oversized home. She's wrong, I said softly. Then, after a beat, or maybe she's not. Jake's brow lifted. What's that supposed to mean? I closed the truck door, feeling the weight of the glove box and the documents inside it. Just that I didn't come here for trouble, I said. But I didn't come here unprepared either. On the lake, a gentle wave slapped the dock, as if marking the moment. Something was beginning. Something Bethany Reed clearly feared. By the time the sheriff drove off and the crowd dispersed, the sun had risen high enough to burn away the morning cool. The lake shimmered bright silver, and dragonflies darted low over the water. It should have been peaceful. It should have been a welcome to a new chapter in my life. Instead, when I stepped onto my porch the next morning, the world was painted neon. At least 10 fluorescent violation notices were plastered across my front door, the porch railing, my truck's windshield, and even taped to the metal winch on the dock like some kind of twisted holiday decoration. They fluttered in the morning breeze, hot pink, neon orange, and blinding yellow, catching the sun and stabbing color across the gravel. The first one read, Unauthorized marina presence, $250 fine. The second, boat color non-compliant with HOA approved pallet, $400 fine. And another, improper dock cleat installation, $150 per day. I stared at them, feeling the slow rise of heat behind my ribs. I'd barely slept, thinking the chaos of the day before had been a fluke. But this was deliberate. I peeled one of the notices from my truck window. The tape ripped off flakes of dried dust. The paper was still warm from the sun. Down by the lake, a motor coughed to life. Jake stood on the dock, elbow deep in the engine compartment of a pontoon boat. When he saw me, he killed the motor and hopped up onto the railing with surprising agility. Morning, he called. Or whatever this mess qualifies as. I held up the neon paper. Do these look familiar? He laughed a humorless laugh. Bethany's greatest hits. She must have been up at dawn. She hit everything but the dog, I muttered. Jake leaned forward. Oh, don't give her ideas. I stepped down toward the dock, the boards creaking under my boots. The lake breeze carried a clean, wet scent, cool and sharp, a contrast to the sour taste of irritation creeping up my throat. Jake, I said, how is any of this even enforceable? Boat color non-compliant? It's white. He shrugged. HOA claims white has variations, says glare from the lake can distract residents during shoreline leisure hours. Basically, she makes it up as she goes. That can't be legal. Sure isn't. But tell that to the single mom down the road who got fined for having a red kayak. Or old Mr. Hanley. They made him move his fishing shed because it was 2 inches closer to the water than some drawing they sketched on a napkin 20 years ago. I let my eyes drift across the shoreline. Bright homes, trimmed hedges, pristine patios. And then the marina, a cluster of docks, boats rocking gently, the morning sun glinting off polished metal and plexiglass windshields. Beautiful, peaceful, yet overshadowed by the invisible reach of one woman's power trip. Jake lowered his voice and glanced around before speaking again. "You want to know a secret?" he said. "Bethany's been collecting lake access fees for years, thousands of dollars every season. Claims it goes to maintenance." He gestured to the warped planks beneath his feet. "But look around. Nothing gets fixed unless a resident calls the county themselves." I already knew some of this. Not all, but enough to recognize the shape of a pattern. Enough to understand why the documents in my glove box made Bethany so nervous. Still, I kept my face neutral. "And nobody's challenged her?" "They tried. She threatens legal action every time. Most of these folks just want peace. They pay the fees and keep their heads down." I exhaled slowly. Peace. That's what I'd wanted when I left my old life behind. After years of dam inspections, flood simulations, and watching communities uprooted by water rights battles. Peace was all I'd been looking for. But I'd also learned something else during those years. When someone controls access to water, they think they control everything. Bethany was no different. The wind kicked up again, sharp enough to scatter a few violation notices from my porch. They skated across the gravel like startled birds. I walked back to the truck and opened the glove box. The thick manila envelope brushed my fingers, weighty, dense, and more powerful than any neon threat Bethany could tape to my door. Across the top, written in clean black ink, lakebed rights and access contracts, Silver Pine. Jake watched me from the dock, curiosity tightening his expression. "What's that?" "Something I bought long before I ever drove onto this road," I said. "Something Bethany really won't like." Before he could ask anything more, a voice echoed from the lakeside road. "There!" Bethany barked, marching toward my property again. "I saw you remove one of the notices. Interference with HOA enforcement is another violation." She was alone this time. No audience, no sheriff. Just her fury and a clipboard clenched like a weapon. The sun caught the edges of her pink blazer, making it almost painfully bright. She pointed at the envelope in my hand. "What is that?" "Paperwork," I said simply. "Let me see it." She extended her hand, chin raised, acting like she had every right in the world. "No." Her mouth twitched. "Refusal to comply with document verification. Bethany," I said quietly, "this has nothing to do with you." "Everything that happens in this community has to do with me," she snapped, stepping so close the perfume from her blazer stung my nose. "You will follow the rules. You will not bring that floating monstrosity into our marina, and you will not challenge this association. Not on my watch." The envelope felt heavier in my hand. Jake's voice drifted from the dock again, calm but firm. "Bethany, maybe give the man a day to settle in." She turned and glared at him. "Stay out of this, Mr. Mercer. You're one violation away from losing your slip entirely." Jake stiffened but didn't move. I could see it in his eyes, a mixture of frustration and quiet defeat. This woman had controlled these people for far too long. I straightened, the envelope tucked under my arm. "Bethany," I said, "I'm not here to cause trouble, but I'm also not here to be bullied." Her nostrils flared. "We'll see." Then she pivoted sharply, marching back across the lakeside road, her heels cracking like a metronome for the storm she intended to bring next. I watched her go, the lake wind tugging sheets of neon paper across the gravel at my feet. And as I lifted the envelope again, feeling the weight of every signature and every map inside, I realized something important. The war over this lake had already begun, and Bethany Reed had no idea she'd already lost the high ground. The afternoon drifted into a gray, restless evening, the kind that feels like the world is inhaling before a storm. Thin clouds slid over the sun, muting the colors of the lake, and the water darkened to a shade of deep steel. The air shifted too, heavy, damp warning of the rain that was building in the mountains beyond the tree line. I carried the envelope inside, set it on the dining table, and brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to peel paint. I needed clarity. I needed patience. And I needed to understand exactly how the HOA had maneuvered themselves into thinking they owned the lake. I pulled out the first set of documents, survey plats from the county, yellowing at the corners but crisp with legal weight. Next came the lakebed rights, some handwritten decades ago, others typed in clunky fonts no one uses anymore. The marina leases were newer, amended twice, notarized, stamped in blue ink. I spread everything across the table like a battlefield map. Outside, a gust of wind slapped the side of the house. The old wooden siding groaned. I glanced through the window. Pine branches swayed, leaves skittered across the porch, and the lake rippled in quick, uneasy breaths. Storm incoming. I traced one finger along a boundary line inked in faded red. There it was, clear as day. The marina. The dock system, the service road leading to the lake, even a thin strip of shoreline. All of it belonged not to the HOA, but to a private land company. And as of 3 months ago, that private land company belonged to me. Lightning flickered above the ridge, illuminating the lake in a brief flash. I walked out onto the porch with the survey maps still in hand. The air smelled of ozone and pine sap. Across the water, lights blinked on inside the houses lined neatly along the bank. In Bethany's oversized 2-story, windows glowed like eyes watching the storm approach. Maybe she was pacing around with her clipboard, plotting her next rule, her next fine, her next attempt to break me. Let her try. The first raindrops tapped against the wood railing. Slow, sparse, almost polite. Then the sky opened. Sheets of rain swept across Silver Pine Lake, blurring the docks, making the yachts and kayaks bob like toys. The wind roared through the pines, scattering branches and sending a loose shingle skidding off a neighbor's roof. The lake hissed under the downpour. I stepped inside and shut the door, water dripping from my hair, the survey papers trembling slightly in my wet hands. This storm felt fitting. Like nature itself was urging me to move, to take the next step. I grabbed an old canvas jacket, shoved the documents into a waterproof folder, and headed out the back door toward the edge of my property. Rain soaked my boots instantly, but the cold shock cleared my mind. Halfway down the slope, I found the first survey stake, a weathered wooden post barely visible beneath overgrown grass. I knelt, brushing water from the carved letters. My flashlight beam bounced off the metal cap property line. Silver Pine Land Co. The storm raged above me, but all I felt was focus. I walked the boundary, following the markers east, each stake confirming the same truth. The HOA had no authority here, not on the marina, not on the road, not even on the narrow strip of land where they'd posted their HOA Marina Rules sign. By the time I reached the old service road, rain was pouring off my jacket in sheets. The gravel path was slick, but I kept moving, flashlight carving a narrow cone through the darkness. This was where the real battle lines were drawn. Not by neon violation notices, not by angry words, but by ink, signatures, and land rights older than most homes around this lake. When I reached the marina, I paused. The docks were empty, deserted in the storm, except for one man under the roof of the boathouse, Jake. He was tightening ropes on a customer's runabout, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. "Remy?" he called over the downpour. "What are you doing out here? Storm will drown you if Bethany doesn't first." I approached him, water splashing at my heels. Needed to confirm something. Couldn't it wait till morning? I handed him the waterproof folder. "Open it." He flipped it open, brow furrowing as he read through the pages, first rapidly, then more slowly, rain hissing around us. Finally, he looked up. "Hold on. This says the marina isn't HOA property. It never was. And the access road, also not theirs." Jake whistled low. "Well, that explains why she was losing her mind yesterday." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating his surprised expression. I took the folder back. "This stays between us for now." He nodded. "You're planning something." "Not planning," I said. "Preparing." Thunder rolled across the lake like a distant drum. Jake tightened another rope, glancing toward Bethany's house just visible through the sheets of rain. "She's not gonna like whatever's coming," he said. "No," I admitted. "But she brought it on herself." The storm eased slightly, rain tapering into a steady patter. The wind calmed, leaving the lake smooth again, reflective, like it was watching me. As I walked back up the hill toward home, soaked to the bone but holding the truth firmly under my arm, one thought echoed in my mind, with the rhythm of distant thunder. Why had Bethany worked so hard to hide something she never owned? The rain had stopped by dawn, but the lakefront didn't feel refreshed. It felt tense, as if the storm hadn't passed but simply taken a breath. Mist hovered low over the water, curling between the docks and drifting across the gravel road like a warning. The air carried the clean scent of wet pine needles, but beneath it lingered something sharp: anticipation. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee warm between my hands. The world was still, except for the occasional creak of dockboards settling after the storm. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to hope maybe today wouldn't unfold like the last. Then I saw her. Bethany Reed stood in the middle of the lakeside road, bright pink blazer blazing against the fog like a flare gun. She had a folding table set up beside her, clipboard, microphone, stacks of paper weighted by river stones. To her right stood 2 HOA board members I'd never seen before, each wearing identical brittle smiles. They looked like people who'd been dragged out of bed and threatened with fines if they didn't comply. A wooden sign, clearly homemade in a hurry, leaned against the table. Emergency HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance. I sighed into my coffee. So it began. Neighbors trickled out of their homes, some rubbing sleep from their eyes, others whispering anxiously. A couple walked down to the docks, pretending to check their boats, but really positioning themselves within earshot. Even the kayakers drifting near the inlet had paused their paddles to watch. Bethany tapped her microphone, causing a sharp squeal to cut across the mist. "Good morning, Silver Pine Lake residents," she announced with the dramatic tone of someone about to lecture a nation. "Thank you for attending this emergency session. Given the recent disturbances, immediate policy action is required to maintain the integrity and safety of our community." I leaned against my porch railing, sipping slowly, refusing to be rushed into the spectacle. Bethany scanned the crowd until her gaze locked on me. Her voice sharpened. "As you all know, a new resident has arrived." A few people glanced my way with sympathetic eyes. "And has already committed multiple violations," she continued. "Unauthorized boat docking, unauthorized vehicle presence, unauthorized access to marina spaces. And last night, possibly interfering with HOA survey boundaries during restricted hours. Jake suddenly appeared beside me, wiping his hands on a rag. Restricted hours? He muttered under his breath. When did she invent that? Bethany wasn't finished. Effective immediately, she announced, raising a sheet of paper like it was a royal decree. The HOA is implementing upgraded safety protocols. She ticked them off with her pen. Mandatory background checks for all new residents. A 48-hour notice for any boat launch or retrieval. A slip usage fee increase. And, she paused for dramatic effect, a temporary suspension of all dock access for residents who have not completed the HOA vessel compliance form. A groan rolled through the crowd like a wave. Someone shouted, "Bethany, that's ridiculous!" Another added, "You can't suspend access. We use the lake to get to work." Bethany's jaw tightened. "Order! This is for your safety." Jake whispered, "Safety from what? Boat paint?" Bethany's eyes flicked toward him. She'd heard. Then she turned her clipboard toward the group again. "And finally, any resident who assists, enables, or cooperates with ongoing violations will be subject to fines and potential legal review." Now the crowd really shifted. Anger, confusion, dread. Her words hung in the air like a threat wrapped in red tape. I set down my mug and stepped off the porch, walking slowly toward the gathering. The mist parted around me. Conversations quieted. Even Bethany's smile flickered before snapping back into place. "Well," she said, microphone lifting toward me, "our violator has arrived." I ignored the bait. "Bethany, no one here asked for these rules, and you know they're unenforceable." She stiffened. "Unenforceable? I am the HOA president." "That doesn't give you authority over land or water you don't own," I replied calmly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Bethany blinked rapidly. "What did you say?" But before I could go further, a familiar voice spoke from behind me. "Morning, folks." Sheriff Marcus Hale stepped into view, hands resting calmly on his belt. He nodded at the neighbors before turning to me. "Remy," he said quietly, "I think we should talk." Bethany practically shoved her way forward. "Sheriff, arrest him for interference." "Bethany," Hale sighed, "I'm not arresting anyone today." He pulled me aside a few steps, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Look," he murmured, "whatever you're planning, whatever documents you showed me yesterday, you're going to need help navigating this, and you're going to need an attorney." "I already have one," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Good, because Bethany is escalating. And if what you hinted at is true, about the marina not belonging to the HOA, the fallout is going to be big." Behind us, Bethany continued her speech, calling for volunteers to serve on a new HOA Marina Monitoring Committee. Every sentence she delivered felt like a rope she was wrapping around herself. Marcus tapped my arm lightly. "Talk to Sarah Mitchell," he said. "She's the best property rights attorney in the county, and she's been waiting a long time for a case just like this." I watched him walk back toward his SUV, rainwater dripping from the wheel wells. The mist began to lift, revealing the lake in soft morning light. Quiet, vast, indifferent to the battles being waged along its edge. Bethany's voice rose again. "These rules are final." Her clipboard slammed down onto the folding table with a crack that echoed across the water. Jake exhaled beside me. "She's losing it." "No," I said slowly, feeling the shift in the air like pressure before a storm. "She's tightening the noose." "On you?" I looked past him, up the hill toward my house where the envelope lay waiting on the dining table. "Not on me," I said. "On herself." For a few days, the lake settled into an uneasy calm, the kind that comes before something breaks. Clouds floated low over Silverpine, clinging to the treetops in thin, restless sheets. The docks creaked at odd hours, as if they sensed what was coming. Even the boats tied along the marina seemed to rock with a quiet tension. Bethany's new rules spread fast. Residents whispered on porches. Others glanced nervously over their shoulders before launching their kayaks, afraid she might leap from behind a pine tree with another stack of neon fines. A few people nodded at me sympathetically when I passed, but most avoided eye contact altogether, terrified of being seen as supportive. And Bethany? She watched everything. Her blinds twitched every time my truck engine started. She took photos of my boat from across the road. She paced the lakeside pavement with her clipboard like a sheriff in a ghost town. Every day that passed without me reacting made her more desperate. I wasn't sure what she'd do next, but I found out the following evening. Golden hour had settled over Silver Pine Lake, laying stripes of shimmering copper across the water. Sunlight caught the ripples and made the whole marina glow. My boat rested in its slip, rocking softly. I stood beside the dock, tightening a line on the stern, feeling the warmth of the day bleed into the cool, approaching dusk. Somewhere across the water, a guitar played faintly from a porch. A child laughed. Wind brushed the surface of the lake with gentle fingers. It could have been perfect. Then I heard her. "Step away from the boat, Mr. Cole." Bethany's voice cut through the stillness like a broken blade. I turned slowly. She stood on the lakeside road above the dock, bright pink blazer catching the last blaze of sunlight. Her expression was twisted with triumph, her heels planted like she was anchoring herself to the earth. Beside her were 2 HOA board members, and standing behind them, unmistakably, Sheriff Marcus Hale. But he didn't look calm this time. He looked uncomfortable. "Sheriff," Bethany boomed, "I demand you take immediate action. This man has threatened HOA officials, defied community safety orders, and continues to illegally access restricted marina property." A murmur rippled across the lake. People stood on porches. Kayakers stopped paddling. A fisherman killed his motor. Even the air seemed to pause. Marcus took a step toward me. "Remy, I need you to come up here. Let's talk." I felt Jake move behind me. "This is insane," he muttered. "You haven't done a thing." "That's the point," I whispered back. "Someone like Bethany doesn't need a thing." I walked up the ramp slowly. The boards groaned beneath my boots, echoing across the still water. At the top, sunlight streaked across my face, warm but fading, the kind of light that feels like a spotlight in an old Western showdown. Bethany folded her arms. "Sheriff, arrest him," Marcus exhaled. "Bethany, we don't arrest people over HOA disputes." Her eyes flared. "He threatened me. He confronted board members. He refused compliance during an official inspection." I stared at her. "I did none of those things." She smiled, sharp, cold, rehearsed. "There are witnesses." Behind her, the 2 board members nodded stiffly, their eyes avoiding mine. I recognized the look. They weren't agreeing. They were surviving. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but procedure was procedure. "Remy," he said quietly, "I'm going to have to detain you while we sort this out." The sunset light flickered across the metal handcuffs on his belt. For a heartbeat, the lake was silent. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't step back. Instead, I lifted my hands calmly. Gasps echoed from the docks as the cuffs clicked softly around my wrists. Bethany let out a satisfied sigh, her shoulders straightening as if a crown had been placed upon her head. She pivoted toward the growing crowd like she was performing for them. "This," she declared, "is what happens when someone tries to undermine the HOA." 2 teenagers on paddleboards stared wide-eyed. A man on a pontoon shook his head in disbelief. Even the wind seemed disgusted as it rolled across the lake, tugging at the edges of Bethany's blazer. Marcus gently guided me toward the squad car. I'm sorry about this, Remy, he murmured. I'll figure it out. I didn't answer. Not yet. When he opened the rear door and helped me inside, the golden light swept across the leather seats. I turned my head, watching the lake through the window, the water glowing like molten gold, the world hanging in stillness. And when Marcus leaned down to close the door, I spoke. Sheriff, check page 3 of the deed packet. He froze. For the first time that day, Bethany's smile faltered, just a flicker, but enough for me to see. She knew something was slipping. The sun dipped below the ridge. Shadows stretched long across the lake. And as the squad door closed with a heavy thud, I felt the story shift. This wasn't ending. It was beginning. The hum of the patrol SUV vibrated through my spine as we rolled slowly down the lakeside road. Golden hour faded into a bruised purple twilight, and the lake mirrored the sky, reflecting streaks of lavender and broken sunlight. Through the window bars, I watched the community from this strange new angle. Docks glowing faintly under porch lights, boats rocking softly, neighbors leaning on railings with the uneasy curiosity of witnesses. Sheriff Marcus Hale kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his brows drawn low. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He was thinking. Hard. Whatever he saw in page 3 of my deed packet, it had gnawed at him the entire drive. At the station, he didn't take me inside. Instead, he parked beneath the awning, turned off the engine, and let the silence stretch. Crickets hummed outside. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice, then settled. Finally, he spoke. Remy, he said, voice low. I looked at that page. I didn't answer. I wanted him to say it out loud. He rubbed his jaw. You purchased the marina lease, and the lakebed rights, and the access road. I nodded once. That means, he continued slowly, the HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over any of it. Not a single plank of those docks. Again, I nodded. Marcus blew out a long breath. Lord help us. He stepped out, opened my door, and removed the cuffs with a soft metallic click. The pressure eased from my wrists, leaving only faint red impressions on the skin. You're free to go, he said. This was unnecessary. Tell that to Bethany, I replied. Marcus winced. About her. We walked into the station lobby where fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled like coffee that had been reheated too many times. He waved toward a conference room, its glass walls fogged with humidity. She's filing a stack of accusations, threatening the board, threatening me. Claims you're a plant from some developer trying to take control of the lake. He snorted. I don't know whether to laugh or retire. A shadow moved behind the conference room glass. Bethany's silhouette pacing, hands flying, voice muffled but unmistakably shrill. She's panicked, Marcus said, but she's also dangerous when cornered. Before I could respond, a door at the end of the hallway opened, and a woman stepped out. Tall, sharp, composed, with a leather briefcase tucked under one arm and raindrops clinging to her dark coat. Mr. Cole? She asked, voice firm. I straightened. Yes. I'm Sarah Mitchell, she said. Property rights attorney. Sheriff Hale called me. Marcus shrugged. You said you already had an attorney. I do, I replied. You. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes scanning me with quick intelligence. He told me to start with the documents you showed him earlier. May I see them? I handed her the deed packet. She opened it right there in the hallway, flipping to page 3. Her eyes narrowed. The fluorescent light reflected off the blue notary stamp and the clean black ink of the signatures. Good God, she whispered. This isn't just a deed. This is a structural ownership bundle. I know, I said. You own every legal right the HOA has been pretending to enforce, she continued. And that means they've been illegally collecting lake access fees, Marcus finished. Sarah exhaled a slow, controlled breath. This is bigger than a moving day spat. This is fraud, possibly embezzlement, and definitely grounds for freezing HOA finances. She closed the folder and looked up at me. Mr. Cole, did you intend to reveal all of this today? No, I said honestly. I wanted peace, but she pushed too far. Sarah glanced toward the conference room where Bethany's silhouette was still pacing wildly. People like her always do. She motioned for me to follow her into an office. The room's single lamp cast a soft yellow glow against wooden paneling. Rain from the earlier storm had left streaks across the window. Sarah sat, spreading the documents across the desk like a general preparing troop movements. Let's walk through everything, she said. The marina lease first. For the next hour, she examined every page, highlighting dates, marking statutes, circling signatures. She murmured legal phrases, riparian rights, shoreline easements, public versus private water boundaries. I answered her questions calmly, and with every pass over the papers, her posture straightened, her eyes sharpened. This isn't accidental, she finally said. This structure, someone built it intentionally, a long time ago. My predecessor in ownership, I said. He kept things quiet, but he documented everything. And now, she said slowly, the ownership has passed to you. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms folded. What do you need from me? A freezing order, Sarah replied. We'll need probable cause to suspend HOA accounts until we finish a full financial review. If what I suspect is true, Bethany has been playing emperor over property she never had authority over. Can do, Marcus said. And Remy? Yes? You need to be careful. She's unraveling. I nodded. That much was obvious from the docs. Sarah tapped her pen thoughtfully. Tomorrow morning, we meet the HOA publicly. Bring these documents. Bring the sheriff. And bring patience. I allowed myself a faint smile. Patience hasn't been the issue. Her eyes met mine. Good, because tomorrow is when the avalanche starts. Outside the window, the storm clouds finally broke apart, revealing the moonlit lake, calm, waiting, shimmering like a sheet of hammered silver. And I realized something. The lake knew the truth. The land knew the truth. The paperwork knew the truth. Tomorrow, everyone else would too. The morning rose slow and heavy, like the world was gathering itself before a blow. Mist clung to the lake in low ribbons, drifting between docks, slipping around boat hulls and pooling against the lakeside road. Pines stood still, their branches dripping with dew. The air was cool enough to sting the lungs and sharp enough to signal change. I stood on my porch, slipping the last document into the binder Sarah had assembled. Marina leases, lakebed surveys, access road ownerships, every piece needed to expose the truth. The weight of it felt both burdensome and liberating, like carrying a gavel before a verdict. Down the hill, movement caught my eye. Bethany Reed was already out, pacing aggressively on the lakeside road, her bright pink blazer practically glowing through the fog. Her hair was arranged into a tight, immaculate shell, like a helmet for war. A portable microphone and speaker, likely the same pair she used to torment neighbors, sat on a folding table beside her. A growing cluster of residents stood around, some still in pajamas, others fully dressed for work, but unwilling to leave before witnessing whatever spectacle was coming. Jake waited at the bottom of my steps, hands in his jacket pockets. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be, I said. We walked down together. The gravel crunched under our boots, and the lake breeze carried the faint sound of water lapping against boat hulls, gentle but constant, like the heartbeat of the land itself. As we approached, the murmurs in the crowd quieted. Even Bethany paused long enough to shift her glare toward me. "Well," she said, voice dripping with triumph, "our troublemaker has arrived." I ignored her and took my place on the opposite side of the table. Sheriff Marcus Hale stood there, arms crossed, badge glinting faintly, and beside him, Sarah Mitchell, her hair pulled back, her binder tucked neatly under one arm. She greeted me with a silent nod. Bethany tapped the microphone, sending a sharp pop across the water. "All residents of Silver Pine Lake," she declared, "today we address the crisis threatening our community. A crisis caused by this man, this outsider, who refuses to obey HOA regulations, disrespects authority, and brings unlawful boats into our marina." Someone coughed. Someone else whispered angrily. Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "Your accusations are noted, Ms. Reed. Now please step aside." Bethany scoffed. "Excuse me? This is an HOA meeting. I am the president." "Not for long," Sarah said calmly. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Bethany's smile twitched, but didn't fully collapse. She gestured broadly. "Fine. Let the attorney speak. I'm sure this will be amusing." Sarah took a breath and opened the binder. "This," she began, holding up a stamped document, "is the county's original marina lease. It shows that the docks, the marina structure, the shoreline easements, and the service road leading to them were never, at any point, owned by Silver Pine Lake HOA." Gasps burst like popcorn. Sarah continued, flipping to another page. "This is the lakebed rights deed. Again, never HOA property." Bethany sputtered. That is taken out of context." "It's not," Sarah said, her calm slicing cleanly through the panic. "Because this," she held up the final document, a bundle of signatures and certified seals, "is the updated ownership transfer. As of 3 months ago, all rights to the marina, lakebed, docks, and shoreline easements belong solely to my client, Mr. Remy Cole." Silence. Absolute silence. Then, "What? You're kidding. He owns the whole marina?" Bethany said, "She lied to us?" The crowd erupted with whispered disbelief. Bethany's face drained of color, her flawless foundation paling into chalk. She stepped back from the microphone, hands trembling so slightly only those closest could see. "No," she said hoarsely. "No, this is impossible. We've collected marina fees for years. We maintain the docks. We enforce lake policy." "You enforced nothing," Sarah said. "You fabricated authority you never legally possessed." Marcus stepped forward. "Bethany, we need to talk about those collected fees." She whirled on him. "This is your fault. You took his side instead of enforcing community standards." "I enforced the law," Marcus said, voice steady. Sarah turned to the residents. For over a decade, this HOA collected lake access fees from homeowners, fees they had no right to charge. These funds were never used for marina maintenance, which is why the docks are in disrepair, despite tens of thousands of dollars collected. Jake muttered under his breath, "Knew it." The elderly couple beside him nodded vigorously. Bethany looked around wildly, seeking support, but no one stepped forward, not even her board members. One of them slowly edged out of her shadow as if stepping away from a fire. "You can't do this," Bethany whispered. "You can't expose this. You don't understand." Sarah closed the binder. "Actually, we understand perfectly, and the sheriff will be taking the next step." Marcus walked toward Bethany with calm, inexorable purpose. The crowd parted for him, murmurs rising like soft thunder. "Bethany Reed," he said, "you're not under arrest, but you are required to come with me for questioning regarding potential financial misconduct and unauthorized use of HOA funds." Her knees wobbled. She tried to speak, tried to argue, tried to summon the iron resolve she'd used to intimidate this neighborhood for so long. But no words came. The microphone on the folding table caught the faintest sound, her shallow, ragged breath, and broadcasted across the lake like the last echo of a collapsing empire. Neighbors stood frozen, processing the shock, the betrayal, the relief. Jake leaned toward me. "I'll be damned," he whispered. She actually thought she owned the lake. I watched Marcus guide her gently toward his SUV, her pink blazer stark and trembling in the morning light. "No," I said quietly. She thought she owned everyone on it. But the lake had its own story, and today it chose to tell the truth. Word traveled through Silver Pine faster than a windstorm over the water. By afternoon, every porch, every dock, every lakeside bench carried the same whispers: fraud, fees, embezzlement, interrogations. You could almost hear the HOA's foundation groaning, buckling under the weight of its own lies. I spent most of the day on my deck overlooking the marina, watching neighbors trickle out of their houses in small groups, sharing stories like survivors comparing scars. The sun drifted across the water in a slow arc, its reflection broken by the gentle rise and fall of docked boats. The lake was calm despite everything happening around it, like a witness with perfect composure. Sometime mid-afternoon, a knock echoed against my wooden door. When I opened it, Jake stood there holding a thick manila folder. "You should see this," he said. We sat at my dining table, the same table where I'd first spread out the lakebed deeds. Jake opened the folder and spilled its contents into the light. Photos, old notices, and copies of lake violations that looked handwritten and suspiciously inconsistent. "These," he said, pointing to a stack of bright yellow slips, "are from last year, supposedly issued by the HOA, except—" He picked one up and held it to the light. "See that?" I squinted. "The signature?" "Exactly. Same signature on every notice, same pressure, same loop on the B, and half of these were issued on days Bethany was out of town. She wasn't even here." I exhaled slowly. "So she manufactured them." "And forced the board to approve the fines," Jake added. "They never questioned it. Or if they did, she steamrolled them." He dropped another batch of papers on the table. Bank statements from an elderly couple down the road. Tiny, neat handwriting covered the margins of each document. "They asked me to show you," Jake said. "They've been paying water quality fees to the HOA for 8 years, fees that never matched the county's official maintenance schedule." My jaw tightened. "Where did the money go?" Jake spread his palms. "That's the thing. Nobody knows. Every time someone asked, Bethany claimed the records were under legal review or being audited, but no one ever saw the results." A knock sounded again. 3 soft taps. I opened the door to find a small crowd forming, neighbors of all ages clutching envelopes, folders, stacks of old HOA notices. Even the elderly couple with the bank statements waited patiently on the porch. One by one, they handed me what they had: records, receipts, accusations they'd been too afraid to voice until now. "We didn't know who to trust," one man murmured. "We thought she had the law on her side," said another. "People moved away because of her," whispered a woman, eyes wet. "She made their lives impossible." The weight of their stories settled heavy in my chest. This wasn't just about hatred for rules or frustration over fines. It was deeper. Years of fear, manipulation, and quiet suffering. And now, finally, a chance to expose it all. By evening, Sarah Mitchell arrived, her coat trailing the faint scent of autumn leaves. She set her briefcase onto the table and looked at the growing mountain of evidence. "Good Lord," she murmured. "This is extensive." "We're not done," I said. Her eyebrows rose. "There's more?" I walked over to a drawer beside the kitchen sink and pulled out a small stack of documents, records I'd kept private until now. Not because they were secret, but because I had been waiting for the right moment. I laid them beside the marina lease and shoreline deed. "These," I said, "are the tenancy contracts for every rental property on this block." She flipped through them, eyes widening. "You bought them?" she asked. "Not all," I said. "Just the ones that were on the market earlier this year, and the ones whose owners were quietly eager to sell." Jake whistled. "How many is that?" 13, I said, "plus the one in probate. 14 in total." There was a stunned silence. Sarah ran her hand slowly over the documents, as if absorbing the gravity of the situation. "Remy," she said, voice steady, "you own more of this block than the HOA itself." I nodded. "Which means the HOA cannot function without access to the lake or the roads leading to it. And since they control neither, they're finished," Sarah completed, "legally and structurally." A breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the faint sound of laughter from children playing near the shoreline. It had been years since the lake sounded this alive. An hour later, as the sun began to dip behind the pines, Sarah stood on my deck, overlooking the water. "We'll present everything at the HOA board meeting tonight," she said. "Marcus is already freezing their accounts. Bethany is still being questioned. The board can either voluntarily resign or push this into a formal court dissolution." "And if they resist?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Then they'll lose in front of a judge." Dusk settled in, tinting the lake in cool blue shadows. Porch lights flickered on. Kayaks scraped gently against the dock as their owners came in for the evening. The community seemed to breathe easier, as if it sensed a shift in ownership, not just of land or water, but of power. As the board members gathered at the community center, Sarah presented every piece of evidence, calmly, clearly, methodically. The rental contracts, the marina deeds, the forged notices, the unauthorized fees, the years of mismanagement. Faces went pale, voices cracked. One board member removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes like a man waking from a long nightmare. "You mean," he whispered, "none of this was real?" "It was real to us," someone replied bitterly. "We paid. We suffered." Marcus stood by, the door, arms crossed, ensuring nothing spiraled beyond control. By the time Sarah finished, there was no shouting, no outrage, just the slow, heavy collapse of something that had ruled this place for far too long. When she concluded her presentation, I stepped forward. "I didn't come here to destroy this community," I said softly. "But I won't let anyone control what they never owned. Not the lake, not the marina, not the people who live here." Silence filled the room. Then I revealed the final truth. "I also now own every rental property on this block," I said. "And without legal access to the marina or shoreline, this HOA has no valid basis to operate." Someone covered their mouth. Someone else quietly sobbed. Relief, shock, grief, every emotion surfaced at once. "So," I finished, "the HOA dissolves automatically." Jake clapped first, then the elderly couple, then others until the community center echoed with applause, wild, cathartic, overwhelming joy that sounded like the first breath after resurfacing from deep water. I let the noise wash over me like the lake wind. "Tomorrow," I said, the smile forming before the words escaped, "we reopen the marina properly." Morning arrived like a celebration all on its own. Light spilled across Silverpine Lake in ribbons of gold, striking every crest of water until the surface looked alive, sparkling, dancing, singing. For the first time since I'd moved here, it felt like the lake breathed freely, and so did the people. When I stepped out onto the porch, a breeze rushed up from the shoreline, warm enough to hint at summer, but cool enough to carry the smell of cedar bark and fresh water. Boats were already moving at the docks, slow, careful motions as neighbors cleaned hulls, replaced weathered ropes, and checked motors. Some of them hadn't touched their vessels in months, maybe years. HOA fear had been a heavier weight than any anchor, but that weight was gone. Jake waved at me from the marina walkway, a wrench in one hand and a thermos in the other. Beside him, two younger guys he'd hired were sanding down loose boards and replacing bolts on the dock cleats. Even the kayakers, who normally skimmed across the lake in silence, seemed louder, freer, their strokes rhythmic and confident. The marina was waking up. I headed down the hill, gravel crunching beneath my boots. A child's laughter echoed from the shoreline. A dog barked somewhere near the boat launch. A woman practiced casting her fishing line, the line whispering through the air before plinking into the water with a soft splash. Every sound felt like a small reclaiming of life. "Morning, boss," Jake said jokingly when I reached the dock. I shook my head. "Don't start." He grinned. "Too late. You own half the block, the entire marina, and apparently the heart of every fed-up resident on this lake. You earned the title." He wasn't wrong, but it wasn't a title I sought. "What's the plan today?" he asked. "Keep things simple," I said. "Let everyone access their slips without fear. Clean up the safety hazards the HOA ignored, and address anything residents want to fix or improve." Jake nodded approvingly. "A real marina, imagine that." Across the dock, Mrs. Brannigan, the elderly widow who lived 2 houses down, stood beside her faded blue fishing boat, her hands shaking slightly as she tied a knot she clearly hadn't bothered with in ages. "Need a hand?" I asked. Her eyes glistened. "It's been so long since I touched this boat without worrying about a fine." "No more fines," I assured her. "Not here." She exhaled softly, like she'd been holding her breath for a decade. A few hours later, as the sun lifted higher, people began arriving in bigger waves, families carrying picnic baskets, older couples in wide-brimmed hats, kids splashing around the dock like they'd been let out of a cage. Someone started grilling hot dogs on a small portable grill. The smell drifted through the air, mixing with the scent of water and pine. Nostalgic, warm, profoundly human. Then came the idea that turned into something much bigger. "Why don't we make this a tradition?" someone asked. "Yeah," another resident said. "An annual thing. A freedom festival." A cheer rippled across the crowd. Jake elbowed me. "Looks like you started something." It wasn't me. Not really. It was the community reclaiming itself. By noon, Silver Pine Lake had transformed entirely. Streamers fluttered from dock posts. Boats lined the water like a parade. Kayaks, pontoons, fishing boats, even a couple of sleek little sailboats that had been gathering dust under tarps for years. Children chased each other across the grass. Music played softly from a speaker on someone's pontoon. People I had never spoken to before walked up, shook my hand, thanked me, and for once I didn't feel like an outsider. Sarah Mitchell arrived around 1 o'clock, her briefcase traded for sunglasses and a denim jacket. "Looks like you're running a festival," she said. I laughed. Wasn't the plan. She walked beside me along the dock. "The prosecutor is building charges against Bethany. Misuse of funds, fraudulent fines, unauthorized collection, forged notices. The list grows every hour." I nodded slowly. "She'll have her day in court." "And you'll have this," Sarah said, gesturing toward the lake. Sheriff Marcus Hale arrived later, this time not as an officer enforcing order, but simply a neighbor off duty, jeans instead of uniform, a baseball cap instead of a badge. He smiled as he took in the scene. "Looks different without neon paper everywhere," he said. "Better," I replied. He handed me a cold drink from a cooler. Condensation rolled down the can. The sun bounced off the lake in 100 golden pinpricks. We did the right thing, Remy, he said quietly. No, I corrected softly. We just uncovered the truth. The lake did the rest. As the afternoon melted into evening, the water turned a deep amber, as though catching fire from the sinking sun. People gathered along the shoreline, raising cups and cans in small toasts. Laughter echoed across the water, mixing with the slap of waves against the hulls. Mrs. Brannigan stepped onto her little fishing boat and cast her line with surprising grace. A cheer rose from a nearby pontoon. Children raced along the dock again, this time without a single parent calling out, "Careful! The HOA will fine us." The freedom was palpable. Jake, Marcus, Sarah, and I ended up at the end of the dock as the sun dipped behind the pines. "You did more than reopen the marina," Jake said. "You gave people back their lake." I looked out at the water, calm, peaceful, reflecting the first flickers of starlight. HOA called 911 on me for moving into my own lake house, I said, the memory feeling almost surreal now. They didn't know I owned the road, the docks. I paused, taking in the laughter, the boats, the community finally alive, and the entire block they tried to control. A soft breeze lifted across the water, carrying the scent of cedar and summer, and something else, something like renewal. Silver Pine Lake, for the first time in years, was free. If you've ever stood your ground against someone who thought they owned more than they did, drop a yes down below, or just leave a justice if you believe in fighting back the right way. Stories like this remind us that sometimes all it takes is one calm voice and the truth on paper to set a whole community free. And if you'd like to ride along for more HOA showdowns and landowner victories, I'd love to have you subscribe and stay with us for the next story.